Helen Garcia knew exactly what her neighbors thought of her weekly flower theft. She'd heard the whispered complaints, seen the security cameras pointed at her, felt the judgment in their stares. But Helen also knew something they didn't, that every Tuesday for 3 years, her son David had been waiting for her in the same spot, and she would bring him flowers until the day she joined him, no matter what anyone called her or how they tried to stop her. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from today? And if you believe that a mother's love knows no boundaries, hit that subscribe button. This story will remind you that sometimes what looks like wrong is actually the most right thing in the world. Every Tuesday morning at exactly 9:15 a.m., Helen Garcia walked slowly down Maple Street, her weathered hands carefully selecting flowers from the gardens of her neighbors. At 73, with silver hair and a slight limp from arthritis, Helen had become the neighborhood's most controversial figure. "There she goes again," muttered Jennifer Walsh from her kitchen window, watching Helen bend down to cut 3 yellow roses from the bush beside her mailbox. "I spent $200 on those roses, and she just helps herself like she owns the place." Helen had heard the complaints for 3 years now. She'd seen the security cameras that Bob Henderson had installed specifically to catch her in the act. She'd read the passive-aggressive neighborhood newsletter articles about respecting private property that were obviously directed at her. "Mrs. Garcia, this has to stop," confronted Sarah Martinez one Tuesday morning, stepping out of her house as Helen reached for her prized white lilies. "These flowers cost money. You can't just take whatever you want." Helen looked up at the younger woman with eyes that held depths of sadness Sarah couldn't understand. "I'm sorry, dear. I know they're beautiful. I'll try to take only what I need. You shouldn't take any. They're not yours." Helen nodded quietly and continued on her way, carrying the 3 white lilies she'd carefully selected. Sarah watched her go, shaking her head at the senile old woman who clearly didn't understand the concept of private property. What Sarah didn't see was the single tear that rolled down Helen's cheek as she walked away. At the monthly Homeowners Association meeting, Helen Garcia had become the primary topic of discussion. "She's stealing from all of us," complained Tom Wilson. "My wife planted those roses for our anniversary, and every week this woman just helps herself. I've tried talking to her," added Susan Chen. "She just ignores me and keeps taking flowers. It's like she thinks she's entitled to whatever she wants." Helen wasn't at the meeting to defend herself. She never attended neighborhood gatherings anymore, not since David died and her world had shrunk to the size of her grief. "Maybe we should call the police," suggested Jennifer Walsh. "Theft is theft, even if it's just flowers." "She's an old woman," protested Maria Santos, the only neighbor who had shown Helen any kindness. "Maybe there's a reason we don't understand." "What reason could justify stealing?" demanded Tom Wilson. "She's taking advantage of our kindness, and it needs to stop." As the meeting continued, Helen sat alone in her small house 3 blocks away, looking at the photograph on her mantelpiece, a young man in military uniform with her same gentle eyes and warm smile. "I'll see you tomorrow, mijo," she whispered to the photograph, as she did every Monday night. "I found the most beautiful flowers for you today." 80-year-old Emma Martinez had been watching Mrs. Garcia for weeks, fascinated by the elderly woman who moved so carefully through the neighborhood every Tuesday morning. Unlike the adults who saw a thief, Emma saw something else. A woman who touched each flower like it was precious, who whispered to herself as she walked, who always looked so sad. "Mama, why do you think Mrs. Garcia takes the flowers?" Emma asked her mother, Sarah. "Because she's not right in the head, sweetheart. Some old people get confused and think they can take whatever they want. But Emma wasn't satisfied with that explanation. The next Tuesday, instead of going straight to school, she followed Mrs. Garcia from a distance, curious about where the stolen flowers ended up. Helen walked slowly through the neighborhood, collecting flowers from 6 different gardens with the same careful ritual she'd performed for 3 years. Emma watched as Mrs. Garcia spoke quietly to each flower, as if apologizing for taking it. The journey led to Riverside Cemetery, where Emma had never been before. She watched from behind a large oak tree as Mrs. Garcia approached a grave in Section C, row 15. Helen knelt down beside the headstone, her arthritis making the movement painful but necessary. Emma crept closer, close enough to read the inscription that would change everything. David Miguel Garcia, beloved son, September 15th, 1989, June 12th, 2021. Until we meet again. Hello, mijo, Helen whispered, placing the collected flowers carefully around the headstone. I brought your favorites today. The yellow roses from Mrs. Walsh's garden, the white lilies from the Martinez house, and those beautiful daisies from the corner house. Emma watched, transfixed, as Mrs. Garcia began to speak to the grave as if her son could hear every word. The neighbors are getting angry about the flowers, David. They think I'm stealing. Maybe I am, but I promised you I'd bring you flowers every Tuesday, remember? When you were little and afraid of the dark, you said the cemetery would be scary. I told you I'd visit you every week and bring beauty to keep you company. Helen's voice broke as she continued. You've been gone 3 years, for months and 8 days, mijo, and I've brought you flowers for every single Tuesday because that was our day, remember? Tuesday afternoons when you'd come home from school and help me in the garden. Emma felt tears in her eyes as she understood for the first time what she was witnessing. The doctors say I might not have much time left, David. The cancer is spreading. Maybe soon I won't be able to walk to get you flowers anymore. But I promise, mijo, I'll keep coming as long as I can breathe. Helen spent an hour at the grave, talking to her son about neighborhood news, sharing memories, and apologizing for not being able to save him from the car accident that had taken him too soon. As Helen prepared to leave, she kissed her fingertips and touched the headstone. See you next Tuesday, mijo. I love you forever. Emma waited until Mrs. Garcia was gone before approaching the grave. The flowers were arranged with perfect love and care, creating a beautiful garden around the headstone of a young man who had died too young. That afternoon, Emma Martinez did something that would change everything for Helen Garcia. She told her mother what she had witnessed. Mama, Mrs. Garcia isn't stealing the flowers, Emma said, tears streaming down her 80-year-old face. She's taking them to her son. He's dead, Mama. She talks to him and brings him flowers because she promised. Sarah Martinez felt her heart break as her daughter described the scene at the cemetery. The grief, the love, the desperate need of a mother to keep her promise to her child. It recontextualized everything. Oh my God, Sarah whispered. What have we done? That evening, Sarah called an emergency neighborhood meeting. This time, the topic wasn't Helen Garcia's theft. It was Helen Garcia's loss. Her son David died 3 years ago, Sarah explained to the gathered neighbors, many of whom were hearing this information for the first time. She's been taking our flowers to his grave every Tuesday. She's not stealing from us. She's keeping a promise to her child. The room fell silent as the weight of their judgment settled over them. I installed security cameras to catch a grieving mother, Bob Henderson said quietly, his voice filled with shame. I threatened to call the police on a woman visiting her son's grave, added Jennifer Walsh, tears in her eyes. Maria Santos, who had been the only neighbor to show Helen kindness, spoke up. "We need to make this right." The next Tuesday morning, Helen Garcia walked slowly down Maple Street as she had for 3 years, preparing for her weekly ritual of flower collection. But this Tuesday was different. As she approached Jennifer Walsh's garden, she found a beautiful bouquet of yellow roses waiting for her with a note, "For David, with love from the Walsh family." At Sarah Martinez's house, white lilies were already cut and wrapped, with a card reading, "From Emma and the Martinez family. We're sorry we didn't understand." At every house on her route, Helen found flowers waiting for her, not stolen, but given with love, understanding, and profound apology. By the time Helen reached the cemetery, she was carrying the most beautiful arrangement she'd ever brought to David's grave, each flower given freely by neighbors who finally understood the depth of a mother's love. "Look, mijo," Helen whispered through her tears as she arranged the flowers. "The whole neighborhood helped me bring you flowers today. You would have loved them, David. They're good people who just needed to understand." Later that week, the neighbors gathered again, but this time it was to organize something beautiful, a permanent flower fund for David Garcia's grave, ensuring that Helen would never have to ask for flowers again. "Mrs. Garcia," Jennifer Walsh said when they presented the plan to Helen, "we're so sorry. We saw theft where we should have seen love." Helen looked at the neighbors who had judged her for 3 years, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude rather than sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered. "David always said that people are basically good. You just proved him right." From that Tuesday forward, Helen Garcia never had to steal another flower. The neighborhood had learned that what they thought was theft was actually the most beautiful expression of love they'd ever witnessed. And every Tuesday at 9:15 a.m., you could see Helen walking slowly to the cemetery, carrying flowers given freely by a community that had learned the difference between taking and loving, between judging and understanding. The flower thief had taught them all that a mother's love truly knows no boundaries, not even death. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories every day. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you believe that a mother's love never dies, subscribe for more stories that will touch your heart and change how you see the world.